This video was brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business.
Hey, what's up? In this video, I'm going to show you how I laid this pine flooring in my house. I've done this in a bunch of rooms. I love this stuff. Stands up great to lots of traffic and wear and tear. And I'm going to show you how I painted it. Black. But you can paint it whatever color you want. Or stain it. Or clear coat it. Anyways, watch the video, follow along, subscribe down below. Check out the links in the video description for links to tools, supplies, merchandise, all that stuff. And enjoy.
Let me start this video by saying I'm going to show you how to do something that I don't really know how to do. Meaning I'm not a floor laying expert, but I have done it a few times in our house previously, so I'm going to show you how I laid those floors. Is it right? I don't know. You can let me know in the comments all the horrible mistakes I've made and things I did wrong, but at least you can see how I did it and decide whether or not this is a direction you'd like to go in for your own home. So this is the room, our guest bedroom. It was definitely built in the 80s with this horrible red oak trim and closet doors. I'm gonna rip all of this out, take up the carpet, and replace it with a little bit of an updated option. Now the first thing I had to do was completely clean this room out, meaning I had to get rid of this horrible bed. Now, funny enough, this was about the second piece of furniture I ever made in my entire life. We had a guest coming to stay, we didn't have a bed, so I built this entire bed in about 2 hours, simply using wood I pulled off of our burn pile out in our pasture. I screwed and glued everything together, so when it comes to taking it apart, it did involve a hammer. This will go back onto the burn pile from whence it came. I'm sure I could build something a little better nowadays. So after taking my hammer and completely smashing apart the bed, I removed it from the room and yes, I threw it on the burn pile. Now of all the weekends I could have chosen to do this project, I had to choose the hottest weekend in the history of Oregon. It's so hot. I mean literally 114 degrees. That's unheard of for Oregon. But as Andy Dufresne says in Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying, which I just might do during the course of this project. After evicting the bed from our guest room, I started ripping off all of that nasty orange trim that they, for some reason, loved during the 80s. How did anybody think this looks good? Of course, that's what our kids will say about all the stuff we're shoving into this house probably, but that's okay. Slowly and meticulously, I removed all the trim, trying my best not to get any splinters or stick a nail through my skin. One time I was removing trim and I just threw a piece on the carpet and I knelt on it. The nail went into my shin bone and was stuck so hard that I had to use 2 hands to remove it. So I tried to be as careful as I could with this trim. I don't need another tetanus shot. After taking the trim off, it was time to get rid of these nasty, ugly closet doors. Now I'm going to be remaking these for another video, so I decided to leave the track system up and save the hardware that came on the closet doors. I figured I could use this same roller hardware and just build some new doors and slap it on there. But you'll have to wait for the barn door, closet door video. Then it was time to get rid of this little closet organization thing. And of course I found a toy to play with. I know, I'm just a kid at heart. But when you're doing demolition, you gotta find little ways to make yourself happy or else you'll just go crazy. I am going to rebuild this closet organization thing, but that will also be in a later video. So for now, I'm just ripping it out and I'll worry about rebuilding it later. Now if you think it's ridiculous that I was pretending to be a ninja, I left my camera rolling and found this footage on it when I came back to edit the video. So I'm not the only one. Get off my back. He's cool too. After completely removing the closet doors and clothes hanging thingamabob, I removed all the trim in the closet as well. And then it was time to start ripping up the carpet. Now, I learned the hard way a long time ago that when you're removing carpet, you don't just try and roll the carpet up in one giant mass. This makes things much harder than they need to be. The best thing to do is to cut the carpet into manageable sized pieces. So I got a box knife and I did just that. Then all you have to do is roll up the carpet, kind of like you're making cinnamon rolls. Although I would not suggest eating these cinnamon rolls, that would be disgusting. And away we go. Can I just pause for a moment and tell you how much I hate carpet? Why people think carpet is a good idea, I have no clue. It is disgusting. It is impossible to ever clean thoroughly. It traps all the dirt. You can't spill anything on it. You walk on it, ugh, gross. Which is why when it comes to cleaning up the carpet pad, I always cover my nose and mouth. You don't know what kind of nasty stank has filtered down through the carpet over the years that's been in place and embedded itself permanently in this gross blue pad. I mean, think about it. Ugh. So with my lungs protected from the years of filth, I start pulling up that carpet pad. Now the carpet pad is stapled down, so you just kind of got to get it up in chunks that it's willing to give you. But once you get it all pulled up, it is time to, well, do my least favorite part, which is remove the hundreds of thousands of staples that are now sticking up proud above your subfloor. The best way I found to do this was just with a little pry bar and a hammer. Also, I had to remove the tack strip around the perimeter of the room. It's best to try and get this up in long pieces. You can break it up a little inch by inch, but that just makes it a horrible pain. So just go slow and you'll be able to get it up in manageable sized chunks. I did have to get a little squirrely into a few tight spaces, but I'm a spry young man. What can I say? With all the carpet strips up and the staples removed, I swept the floor thoroughly, making sure that I got rid of all the staples and nails and bits of debris. If you don't, it's not going to be too easy to lay your floor, so you want to make sure that the subfloor is very smooth. Next, it was time to start looking at our flooring choice. For this, I'm using tongue and groove pine. I discovered tongue and groove pine for a flooring option a few years ago when I ripped out carpet in our upstairs landing area. It is a great option if you want a wood floor but you don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. Yes, pine is a cheaper, softer wood, but it is much better than carpet, and we're going to paint it, so it's going to look great in the end. The first thing I had to do was figure out my first board. Now the other nice thing about this tongue and groove pine is it's crazy long. You're not dealing with a bunch of little strips like you are with a regular hardwood flooring, which means that we can do one piece wall to wall and hopefully save ourselves a little time. So after measuring the size of my floor, I determined that I was pretty sure I could just start with a full board and end with a full board when I got to my door. Now the most important part when you're laying any real wood floor is that you need to leave a space around the perimeter of the floor so the floor can expand and contract. So I just used a few sets of the 1/2-inch staples that I'll be using to hook the floor to the subfloor as my spacers. Because it's tongue and groove, I rented this power nailer from our local flooring store. And I think it cost me about, $20. It's not bad, so you can easily hunt one down and rent one yourself. The problem is, for our first board, it won't quite fit up against the wall. So to set my first board, I got it where I wanted it, and then I just tacked it down with a 16-gauge nailer. Yes, these nails will be visible, and if you really are worried about it, you could fill them with a little wood putty. But the floor is pine, it's got a bunch of knot holes and imperfections, so I'm just nailing it down and I will forget about it shortly. After getting my first board in place, it was time to lay our second board. Now, if you've never used one of these pneumatic power nailers before, they're pretty slick. There's a little plate that sits on top of the board, and the nail, or staple actually, comes at an angle right through the tongue of the board, so it makes it a concealed fastener. You won't see it once you slap the next board on. Now, I knew my length wall to wall was the same throughout the entire room, so I decided to save a little time and cut multiple boards at once. This Rockler quick action clamp worked perfect to hold the boards at the same length while I cut them. You should just probably make sure your saw is secure before you start cutting. Mine wasn't actually locked in place, and it gave me a little bit of a jolt as I made that first cut. But hey, it worked. So I just started cutting about 3 or 4 boards at once to the right length, taking them upstairs, plopping them in place, and securing them with that pneumatic power nailer. Now, because these boards were long enough to go wall to wall, it did make it go quicker. But I ran into an issue where some of the boards had a little bow in them and they didn't want to hug the next board properly. So this is the solution I came up with. I took a woodpecker square, and using the little hole on one end of it, I just added a nail. This allowed me to pivot the square around and put pressure on that board and remove that bow. Then I took another nail and hammered it on the outside to hold that square secure while I could fasten the board in place. All I had to do was work my way along with that power nailer everywhere that the square wasn't, and then when I was done hooking the board on, I came back and removed the square and added a few staples where the square was. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Man, it's been a while since I used that one in a video. Feels good. Feels really good. Another issue that I ran into was this floor vent. The way I took care of this was I just laid a few boards over the top, and then I marked on those first few boards exactly where I needed to cut out for that vent. But I didn't cut it out right away. For some reason in my mind, I thought it would be easier if I completely covered up the vent and then just cut it all out at once. Is this the best way to do it? I don't know, but hey, like I said, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm just going with it. Before I completely covered up the vent, however, I marked the end on the wall, so I could transfer that mark onto the boards after I got them completely covered up. And I just kept doing this over and over again as I covered it up, making sure I had it properly marked out where I would need to cut in the future. And then it was just back to cutting more boards to length, hauling them upstairs, and continuing to lay them down as I worked my way across the room. I mean, it's really not that complicated. I will say that in doing this, I gained a huge respect for anybody that lays floor or tile for a profession. It is not easy work. Up and down and up and down and up and down. Boy, you get a workout. And yes, I should have just got myself some knee pads, but they were all the way out in my shop. That was a good 200 yards away. I wasn't going to walk out there. I'd much rather be crippled for the rest of my life. Jeez, Jason, quit being so lazy, you idiot. But as you can see, once you get in a groove with the flooring, it does go pretty quick. The pine lays very nice, and I only had to fix a bow in a board a handful of times. For the most part, they smack together nice and even. Once I had boards laid across my entire floor vent, I took the 16 gauge nailer and I nailed all the little pieces in place. Once we cut out the floor vent, those aren't going to be locked in as well, so you got to make sure to hook those down properly. With that done, I took an oscillating multi-tool and I cut each end that I had previously marked out, just all the way through the floorboards until I hit the subfloor. Then I was worried about little pieces and sawdust falling into the vent itself and not being able to get them out. So I took a piece of blue tape and I taped it across the entire thing before I cut out each side. Then just using that oscillating multi-tool, I cut through each side until the piece wiggled free. Then all I had to do was take my piece of tape and peel it back off. I didn't know if this would work, but it worked really well actually. Every now and then I've got an idea that actually works the way it's supposed to. Now remember how I said I thought I could start with a full board and end with a full board? Well, my math was off somewhere. I was about 1/4 of an inch shy from being able to just cover up that gap with the trim. I was pretty upset. So I'll have to figure out this little gap somehow. But before I did that, I needed to remove part of the casing for the closet door so that I could slide the flooring underneath it. So again, using my oscillating multi-tool and a piece of scrap flooring to set the height, I just cut out a chunk, first on the left side, and then I did the exact same thing over on the right side, making it very tight. I didn't want a gap at the bottom. I wanted to just be able to slide that flooring underneath, which it looks like I will be able to. Then to fill that little gap that I was left with over by the door, I went out to my shop and I ripped down a piece of flooring. Then I took that piece of flooring and I just slid it in that gap. Yes, this is tighter than I want it to be along the wall there, but it's only in one place. I think it'll be okay, right? I mean, it can still expand and contract on 3 out of 4 sides. I don't know, maybe that's horrible and wrong and I shouldn't have done that, but like I said, I really don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just gonna hope for the best. Once I got that strip hammered in there, I tacked it in place again with a 16 gauge nailer. Now I will be making a transition piece to cover up that seam over by the door, but we will get to that here in a little bit. I also cut a tiny little strip for the other side. This will pretty much completely be covered up by the trim. I just put it in there because I can't leave well enough alone. Then I cut a piece of flooring that would perfectly span in between my closet section, and I tapped it in place under my pre-cut closet casing thingamabob. And wouldn't you know, I really lucked out with this because one piece of flooring was the exact right size to span that internal dimension of the closet opening, which means I didn't have to cut any boards around the corner. All I had to do was take another piece of flooring and slap it on the other side, and I was inside my closet now. And this is where things started to get just a little tight, because you only got so much room to work with that power nailer. So I just worked my way along as far as I could, and then when the power nailer wouldn't fit, I switched to the 16 gauge nailer. But I just used it like the power nailer, and I sent the nails right through the tongue of each board, so they still won't be visible. Then I came to my first cut in a board, meaning, all the boards were cut, but the first cut that had to go around a corner. So I just took a little scrap piece of flooring, I marked out where I needed to make my cut, and I wrote all my dimensions on the little scrap piece. I then took this scrap template piece out to my shop, and I laid out exactly where I needed to cut on a full piece of flooring. Then all I had to do was take that piece of flooring and run it through my table saw. But I didn't run it all the way through because we had to make a little notch, so I just ran it through right up to my line. Yes, this will overcut on the bottom, but it's the bottom. You're never going to see it. It's tacked to the floor. And then I finished it off over on the chop saw. I know it's not pretty. I had to break a little bit there, but again, you're not going to see it, people. It's going to be completely covered up and hidden by trim. Then I went back into the closet to see how well my measurements worked out. And wouldn't you know it, they were perfect. Man, I love it when I get it right on the first time. Then I used the pneumatic power nailer on the side that I could reach because of that little bump out in the closet. And then on the other side where I couldn't reach, I went back to the 16 gauge nailer and hooked it in place using a little pry bar to give me some leverage against the wall and pull that seam nice and tight. Now, it's a good thing I'm such a fit and thin individual, because for the final home stretch of flooring, I really had to get in this tight space in the back of the closet. It kind of made me wonder if I should have started in the closet and worked my way out into the room. I don't know what the proper thing to do is when it comes to laying flooring, but I figured that my ugliest piece would probably be the last piece I put in, and I wanted to try and hide that in the closet if at all possible. But wouldn't you know, my last piece fit in, well, perfect. Again, I had to use the 16 gauge nailer because the pneumatic power nailer wouldn't fit up against the wall, but I just plopped it in place and used that pry bar to pull everything nice and tight, and then sent a few nails right through the top of the piece. Worked out pretty good. This video was sponsored by Squarespace. Ooh. I have been a Squarespace customer as long as I have had a business because it's easy. You get online, you pick out what template you want, and you just plug in all your pictures. My favorite part about Squarespace is their e-commerce platform. It allows me to upload sweet products like these motivational posters, in case you need a little pick-me-up throughout your day. I was also able to upload my full line of t-shirts, like these beauties. Seriously, stop making pallet furniture. The other beauty is that there is no limit to the number of products you can sell through Squarespace, which comes in really handy with my plan sales, because I'm guessing there will be a lot more of these in the future. And if you're not around your computer, Squarespace is completely optimized for mobile. I mean, you don't even have to do anything. It just automatically is. So your website looks just as great on your mobile phone as it does on your computer, which is pretty flippin' sweet if you ask me. So here's what you're going to want to do. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/bourbonmothwoodworking to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And with that, my entire floor is installed. I was able to get this entire thing laid in just an afternoon. It really wasn't bad whatsoever. Now here's where personal preference comes in a little bit. You could sand and finish this and leave it natural, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint it. And the paint I'm using is this emerald urethane enamel. This stuff is insanely hard. I've used it to paint multiple other floors in our house that have been in for years now, and they still look just as good as they did the day that I laid them. But before I can start painting, I needed to take off my shoes. I don't know why, I always take my shoes off when I paint a floor. I think it just makes me more aware of where the paint is, and I know right away if I accidentally step in some so I don't end up tracking it all over the rest of the house. Now, I normally hate painting. I hate spraying cabinets, I hate painting walls, but there is an exception with painting floors, because it's so stinking easy. You can stand up, you don't have to deal with gravity and the paint running all over the place, which means that you're able to put on an extremely thick coat for your first coat and not have to worry about it running. So I just took my time and I laid down a very thick coat of paint over the entire floor. I'm actually only gonna do the one coat. You really don't need more than that. One coat is plenty to get good coverage, and as I have mentioned, I know from experience this paint stands up great to everyday wear and tear. I mean, we have dogs, we got a kid that drives trucks all over it, I drag stuff across it, and it just keeps looking great. So with my paint and roller, I slowly work my way across the entire floor. Now I will say you want to go with the grain. There's really not any roller marks left. The paint soaks pretty good into the wood, but just to be safe, I like to work my way with the grain, trying not to start and stop abruptly in any one spot. And of course, you want to make sure that as you're painting the floor, you don't paint yourself into a corner on the far side of the room, because then you're going to get your floor 99% of the way painted and you're not going to be able to get yourself back out. So I started in the closet, then on the far wall, and I just worked my way across until I had just a little space left to paint, and could still step out of the room. With our floor completely painted, there was just one thing left to do. I needed to make a small transition piece to cover up the gap in the doorway. See, I had laid this painted pine flooring on our landing previously, and I didn't do it in a way that I could just continue that flooring seamlessly into the bedroom. Well, I could have just slapped down a piece, but it wouldn't have been tongue and groove together, and I thought a little transition piece would look better. So I just ripped down an 1.5 inch piece of my flooring and then planed it down to 1/4 inch. Then using a 1/4 inch roundover bit, I added a nice little roundover on either side of said piece. Then I took another scrap piece of flooring and I wedged it in that gap that was created between the old floor and the new floor. Then I took my little transition piece, plopped it on top, and I just tacked it in place with the 16 gauge nailer. Is this the right way to do a transition piece? I have absolutely no clue, but it seemed right to me. It only sticks up 1/4 inch. These transition pieces are very common with laminate flooring going from one room to the next, so I thought it would be okay. And most importantly, I checked to make sure that the door would still shut. And wouldn't you know, it shuts just fine. Plenty of room. And I've got some pretty nice legs there, if I do say so myself. Look like a 10-year-old schoolboy. And finally, I painted the piece black to match the flooring. I probably should have painted this first and then installed it. It would have been easier, but hindsight's 20/20, and I got it done in the end. And just like that, the floors were complete. As I mentioned before, I've actually laid these exact same floors painted black in a few other rooms and spaces around our house. It's a great option if you don't like carpet, which you shouldn't because it's disgusting. The emerald urethane paint from Sherwin-Williams stands up great to heavy traffic, as you can see with these floors here that were laid about 2 years ago.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you learned something. Or I hope you picked out a bunch of mistakes that I made in laying this floor. Because like I said, I don't know what I'm doing. But regardless of whether you learned something or saw a bunch of mistakes, I hope you enjoyed yourself. Make sure you subscribe down below. Check out the video description for links to products, merchandise, plans on my website, all that jazz. And most importantly, have a great day.